Crisis Radio. So we're looking at this confab of the G20 finance ministers, central bankers, just wrapping up now in Seoul, South Korea, preparing the big G20 heads of state, heads of government, International Economic Summit, 11th of 12th November. And TheStreet.com freaked out about more and more countries preparing capital controls and exchange controls. Now, again, I don't regard capital controls and exchange controls as the definitive solution, but they are part of the solution, and they are a step in the right direction because they are a way to prevent evil finance oligarchs, financiers, international speculators from ruining your currency, either by driving it up and ruining your export industries or by driving it down and forcing you into IMF slavery. They're a very important element, and Malaysia proved it under Mahathir Mohamad in 1998, the country that fared best during the so-called Asian contagion, which was really a dollar contagion, a crisis of the dollar system at that time, and they seemed to come every 5 to 10 years, as Paulson, I think, told Bush in 2008. It's just one of those things under globalization. This is now something that's spreading. In other words, the Malaysian example of 1998 and some other countries that did things, including Thailand, this is now spreading. Let's see what this dispatch says. The Central Bank of the Philippines has said this past week it will use a combination of tools to manage capital flows because those inflows can complicate monetary policy. Again, if you're trying to sell something and your currency goes into the stratosphere, you won't be selling it. The level of the concern is that the governor of the Philippine Central Bank, Armando Tetangco, says they may boost foreign exchange reserves that they hold themselves, external debt prepayment, and easing rules of investment by domestic agents. Now, this is pretty small beans. Much more important is South Korea. This is the big one. The deputy finance minister of South Korea has said that the Seoul government is studying measures to control capital flows, including, and pay attention, including a Tobin tax. A Tobin tax. This means the Wall Street sales tax, the securities transfer tax, the financial transactions tax, the trading tax, the Robin Hood tax. Wall Street sales tax, I think, is the best. Internationally, it's known as a Tobin tax. James Tobin, Nobel Prize, Yale economist, came up with the idea of a tax on turnover, a sales tax like you pay. When you go to the store, even in some states for groceries, certainly for shoes and clothing, you pay sales tax. Zombie bankers pay nothing. Time for them to pay, time for them to ante up, time for them to cough up. So South Korea, if they do it, they're studying measures to control capital flows, including a Tobin tax. That's not all. A bank tax, also a good idea. This is more a tax on banks you can do it many ways. The capital can be taxed. The profits certainly ought to be taxed. We have a mockery of a situation where we have in the U.S., a corporate income tax is on the books, but nobody pays it. And then they complain about it nonetheless, even though they don't pay it. They say it's too high because it costs too much to avoid it. Well, that's too bad, finance oligarchs. So a Tobin tax, a bank tax, and leverage controls. This is important, too. You want to make sure that you're not allowed to use a small amount of your own money plus a huge amount of borrowed money and then go speculate with that, because that's wonderful. As long as you have positive leverage, you're going to get super profits out of that. But as soon as everything begins to go down, you then get super losses and bankruptcy all around. So banks and other investors, speculators, have got to be prevented from this kind of leverage. And that leverage, above all, should be applied to commodities markets, that you shouldn't be able to speculate in oil with large amounts of borrowed money. It's like a margin requirement. If it were stocks, you'd be calling it a margin requirement. How much borrowed money can you use to speculate with a stock? So this is South Korea, a Tobin tax. Now, the context for it, of course, is that Sarkozy, much reviled and deservedly so, at the United Nations, a couple of weeks ago, proposed this universal tax on financial transactions. The genie is out of the bottle, as I predicted at the time. The South Korean finance minister, deputy finance minister are studying the Tobin tax, and somebody can say, what, are you a communist? Naturally, a U.S. hedge fund operator will accuse them of communism, and they can say, no, the right-wing, anti-labor, anti-immigrant president of France, no left-winger has been beating the drum for this, and Sarkozy will be beating the drum at 11th, 12th November, because that's part of his election campaign. He's got to have some left cover, something other than beating people up in the streets with his cops. So this is the answer. And again, in this fallen world that we're in this very desperate world situation, where even some of the positive forces that were around in '02 and '03 are no longer there, and the U.S. peace movement that you used to have is no longer there. Many other movements in the U.S. have essentially been euthanized by Obama, the gravedigger of mass movements here. You gotta take what you can get, and you've got to find gold where you can. So a world movement to tax financial speculators is extraordinarily positive. And if we pair that with the question of foreclosures here in the U.S., which we'll get to in a minute, that's already the beginning of mobilizing people to fight bankers. The ABC of effective politics: fight bankers, fight finance oligarchs. This is the root of evil in society. Just as St. Paul said, cupidity, right? The love of money, greed, is the root of all evil. So the banking component, the finance oligarchs in society, are the key to the structures of evil in a given society. And we're seeing that again. Let me just add parenthetically, the ruling class, with an interesting book now, Angelo Codevilla, a veteran reactionary staffer from Capitol Hill going back to the 1980s, I think going back to Jesse Helms, if I'm not mistaken, has a book out about the ruling class, except he thinks the ruling class are the Washington hack politicians. Angelo, that's not the ruling class. The ruling class are the super rich financiers, the Koch brothers and Soros. And when Koch meets Koch and Koch meet Soros at the board meeting of the Metropolitan Opera or the Metropolitan Museum of Art or whatever it is in some fabulous Manhattan penthouse, they talk about the peons, the marginals, the rednecks, the little people, and they talk about it in rather similar ways. It's just that they have different rackets, right? Gang and counter gang are being used. So, Tobin tax and foreclosures. Now, but just see what's going to happen here at this G20. Essentially, it won't succeed in doing anything the U.S. wants. The U.S. is engaged in economic warfare against China, and China is hanging tough, and we'll get more about that in a minute.